Hello, welcome to the James Cooley Show. It's your life. I'm your host, Dr. James J.C. Cooley. Wow. I'm about to say wow 3-4 times a day because, it's Wednesday. And you know what happens on Wednesday. It's 360-degree health. And you also know that we got the guest co-host, Dr. Michael Mantell, with us again today. And what that brings is another absolutely fantastic guest. But I'm not going to take up all the time right now. How you doing, Dr. Mike? How you doing today?
Doing very well. Thank you. I'm so thankful it's another Wednesday and another 360-degree of health. And we have a incredible, renowned physician with us today. It's going to be a great show.
It's going to be a great show. How you doing, Dr. Michelle Cooley? How you doing?
I'm doing great. And as Dr. Mantell said, we have another amazing doctor guest on the show today. He's going to blow our mind with what he's going to educate us about.
I'm excited. And Todd, back in our California studios. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good, and we're ready to lock it in.
Let's lock in all the platforms
sponsored
right now.
by James J.C. Cooley.
Dr. James J.C. Cooley.
Hello. Welcome to the James Cooley Show. It's your life. I'm your host, Dr. James J.C. Cooley. It's Wednesday, 360-degree health. Dr. Michael Mantell is back with us again. So I am locked in and I'm excited about the show today. I'm excited about this guest that we got. I'm excited. Well, I'm be real with you. I'm excited to be alive, and I'm glad that you all are alive to listen to us, right? We got an absolutely fantastic show. Let me put this out before whichever platform that you're watching us on, was you watching us on E36 Television, Transfer TV, YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, or over 6 to 8 live platforms, welcome to the show. And if you want to be part of the conversation, all you have to do is go to the comments on the platform that you're watching us on, ask any question that you might have. And I promise you we'll get you an answer. Or I'll make it easy for you because you're live on radio as well. All you have to do is pick up the phone and dial 1-888-344-1170. Again, that's 1-888-344-1170. Dr. Mike, how are you doing today, sir?
Doing very well, and I'm glad to be alive, as you say. So that's health above all. That's what the show is about. Health comes first before anything else, more important than anything I can think of. And I think that the guest today is going to be aiming our brains forward. We're not going to be looking in the rearview mirror. We're going to be looking forward because this gentleman has created the world's most incredible healthcare system. And he just wrote a book that skyrocketed to #1 on Amazon. But I don't want to go into too much detail. I'll let Dr. Michelle tell us all about him.
How you doing, Dr. Michelle Cooley? How you doing today?
I'm doing good. I can't wait to tell the audience all about our guest today.
I haven't seen you all day. Where you been? I've
been working.
Okay. Hey, Michelle, can you do the honors? Can you please introduce the title of the show, purpose of the show, and introduce this absolutely magnificent guest that we have?
Most definitely. So, audience, the title of today's show is ChatGPT MD, how AI-Empaneled patients and doctors can take back control of American medicine. So Dr. James J.C. Cooley and Dr. Michael Mantell having a sit-down conversation with Dr. Robert Pearl. He's a physician, a clinical professor of plastic surgery at Stanford University School of Medicine, faculty member of the Stanford Graduate School of Business, former CEO of the Permanente medical group, Kaiser Permanente, and he's a best-selling author. He's going to talk about not all AI is the same. Generative AI will save hundreds of thousands of lives and reduce medical costs. The combination of a dedicated clinician, empowered patient, and GenAI will be incredibly more powerful than any of the three alone. Chronic disease has overwhelmed the American healthcare system, leading to stagnant life expectancy, higher costs, and epidemic of burnout. And success will require that we shift payment in healthcare from pay for volume to pay for value. So again, Dr. Robert Pearl, he was the CEO of Kaiser Permanente from 1999 to 2017. In this role, he led 12,000 physicians, 42,000 staff, and was responsible for the nationally recognized medical care of over 5 million Kaiser Permanente members on the West and East Coast. His newest book, ChatGPT MD, How AI-Empowered Patients and Doctors Can Take Back Control of American Medicine, debuted at #1 on Amazon's new bestseller list. All the profits from the book are going to Doctors Without Borders. You know, there's so much to talk about this guest. It's going to take all day, so I'm just going to introduce him. Audience, please welcome to the show, Dr. Robert Pearl.
It's my pleasure, Dr. Michelle, Dr. Michael, and Dr. JC. It's great to be with you folks today.
It's an absolute pleasure having you on the show today, sir. And I mean, AI is a major presence in our world and everything that we do right now. And it's my understanding that took a while before many of the doctors switched over to that platform because that they did not trust a lot of the things or did not know what the program actually could do to help out medicine, to help out mankind, to help out a whole lot of things. So I'm excited to hear about that. But before we go off into this, Dr. Robert Pearl, can you tell our viewers and our listeners a little bit more about you, where you grew up, why you pursued medicine, and what makes you you?
I was born in New York, and I decided I wanted to be a college professor. And I was going to teach philosophy. And in my first year of college, I was 17 years old. And my mentor, the individual that got me very interested in the field, didn't get tenure. And the reason wasn't his academics. He went on to become chairman at Reed College. But it was his politics. And I said to myself, I don't want to be in a field with politics. And as a naive 17-year-old, I thought medicine would be politics free. This is the serendipity of life. You know, I couldn't imagine that when it came to life and death, that these kinds of other forces would intervene. Did my training, I went to medical school at Yale, and then went out to Stanford, where I started actually pursuing cardiac surgery. And then I went on a trip to Mexico and did cleft surgery and fell in love with the field. In fact, I'm still doing it. I just came back from the Philippines a couple of months ago, my wife and I, and we did surgery there on quite a number of children born with cleft lip and cleft palate. But anyway, that was the path that I pursued. And when I was done with my training, the plastic surgeon at Kaiser Santa Clara died in a tragic plane crash. And they called me up. They said, Robbie, what are you going to be doing next year? I said, I'm going to probably travel around South America and fix kids with cleft lip and cleft palate. They said, could you give us 6 months? And I said, sure. What's 6 months? Serendipity. I'd never heard of Kaiser until that moment. Wow. I got there and I loved it. I loved my practice. I loved my patients. And then the organization got into big trouble. 1998. Lost hundreds of millions of dollars. We were down to 2 days of cash. Had to borrow a day of cash to stay in business. The CEO steps down. They're looking for people. I know a couple of people I think could do a great job. I call them up. I said, why don't you guys go for it? And I'll support you. And they said, you out of your mind? This is a terrible job. And at some point, I had to step forward. I think that's the biggest thing that I would say about who I am. When there's a way to make the world better, when there's a way to do good, I find that really attractive. When there's a way to be creative, to create new ways to innovate, I find that energetic. And that's who I am today. And that's what I'm still pursuing and writing this book, ChatGPT MD, How AI-Empowered Patients and Doctors Can Take Back Control of American Medicine is just the latest example.
Wow, that's breathtaking. That's why you are who you are. And that's the benefit we're going to have from learning from you today. Let me start with a big question. What do you see today, given this vast experience you've had throughout your career, as the most urgent structural changes needed in U.S. healthcare today? If you could press the button, what are some of the things you'd like to change? We're going to get into AI, but let's look at the bigger picture first.
So let's put it into context. What's happened over the past 2 decades? What we've seen is American life expectancy has been flat. We're no better now than we were in 2010. We've seen the cost soar. Half of Americans can't afford the out-of-pocket expense that sits in play. Burnout is rampant. Over half of physicians are experiencing this devastating problem affecting their personal lives, their professional lives. And I asked myself, why is this, to the point you're making? What's going on? And when I look, what I see is chronic disease. We're in a crisis of chronic disease. 1/3 of Americans either have diabetes or pre-diabetes. According to the CDC, if we could manage chronic disease well, and they don't mean perfect, they just mean as well as the best today, 30 to 50% of heart attacks, strokes, kidney failures, cancers would be gone. So to me, what I see as the biggest problem is the crisis of chronic disease, which is only getting worse. Hypertension accounts for 40% of strokes. Diabetes is the #1 cause of kidney failure, major contributor to heart disease, 80% of peripheral amputations. We can go down the list of chronic diseases that are there. And so the question that I have is, how can we use modern technology to be able to address this epidemic of chronic disease, both to help prevent it, but I would say even more importantly, to be able to manage it well once patients have it, so that we can avoid the heart attacks and the strokes and the cancer and the kidney failures and the cancer. And I'd ask listeners and viewers to just ask themselves, what would happen to the health of this nation if we could accomplish that? And what would happen to the cost of medicine if we were successful?
Wow.
Amazing.
That is amazing. And then, you know what? I'm lost for words, but we got to take a station break. But we're going to come back. We got a lot more, Dr. Pearl, that we're going to talk about. And I tell you what, whichever platform that you are watching us on, if you want to be part of this great conversation, all you have to do is go to the platform, go to the comments, ask any question that you might have, or pick up the phone and dial my main man Todd at the studio. That's 1-888-344-1170. Again, that's 1-888-344-1170. It's your life, and we'll see you shortly after the break.
There's more stories of greatness to help you overcome adversity coming up on It's Your Life with James Cooley.
A Black Man's Point of View is the newest Amazon.com #1 release. And
The James Cooley Show. It's your life. That's right.
Really get a chance to know who you are. And once you know who you are, you truly know who you are, love who you are. Love who you are. You're a masterpiece. Love who you are. Love who you were born to be. Love me some me. That's what I'm talking about. When you leave high school, you gotta know today or tomorrow, or hopefully today, what your plans are. Hopefully, there is no bad decision unless there is no plan. Create, collaborate, commit with confidence. Commit with what? Commit with what? In everything that you do. Hello, welcome back to the James Cooley Show. It's your life, and I tell you what, I was in awe in the first segment, and the first segment is normally getting an opportunity to know the guests and feel like we already know this guy. This guy, you can tell he's a genius already, and all the different things that he is doing. And I tell you what, as he is talking about in all of the fields, especially in the medical fields, I believe, don't know, I'm not a physician, that with the new and the latest innovation of AI, it's kind of helping the patient-doctor relationship a little bit. But I don't know. We're going to find out shortly. And so that's going to be my first question right there, Dr. Pearl. The question is, how do you see generative AI changing the current doctor-patient dynamics? And what impacts could this shift have on the trust and the communication between patient and doctor?
I believe that this technology can improve a doctor-patient relationship. I was on a podcast last month, and at the end, as you know, often the guest will talk with the interviewer when you're off air. And the interviewer asked me, she said, my husband fell skiing several months ago, and his arm was over his head. He slid down about 100 feet, and his shoulder still hurts. He can't use that arm as well as the other side. What's going on? I said to her, I think I know exactly what he has. She knows I'm a skier. She knows I'm a physician. But why don't you go to ChatGPT? And by the way, I talk about that because I like ChatGPT, MD. They go together. You can use Gemini or Claude. It doesn't matter which one. And I have no financial relationship with any of these companies. And I said, why don't you go there, use the free version, put the information in place, and let me know, and then I'll tell you what I think. 5 days later, she calls me back. She says, thank you. She said, ChatGPT said he probably had a rotator cuff tear. He needed an MRI to establish a diagnosis, and he should see an orthopedic surgeon because he almost definitely needed surgery. Now compare that to going to a search engine like Google. You'd get 100 different differential diagnoses of shoulder pain, another 50 reasons why one arm is not as good as the other side. And of course, it would tell you to go to a doctor because that's how it protects itself. But no, this is expertise. And by the way, end of this month, November 30th, is just the 2-year anniversary of generative AI being available to people. We're so early in this process. And she said, she went to the surgeon. He said, you probably have a rotator cuff tear. You need an MRI. And you need surgery. And at the end of the case, he said, if you had not come in for several more months, I'm not sure I could have reattached the tendon to the bone where it was torn off because the muscle would have contracted. Now think about the quality of that relationship. When he started talking about the diagnosis, they knew what he was saying. When he recommended an MRI, they knew why. And when they suggested surgery, they understood that well. So one aspect is, I believe that an empowered and informed patient can have a better relationship with a doctor than the traditional model that sits in place. The second thing about it, as I mentioned earlier, generative AI can reduce heart attacks, strokes, kidney failures, cancers by 30 to 50%, according to the CDC data. And that means there'll be less demand on the clinician, which frees up time. The typical doctor today spends 17 minutes with a patient. In 17 minutes, you can barely introduce yourself, find out about an acute problem, maybe do a little bit of past history and look at some of the chronic diseases. You can't have a relationship in 17 minutes. And if you now have half of your patients being able to get care without having to come to your office, it frees up time for the group that needs it. And I want to add a third piece, because the people listening in, the ones from technology, will really understand this, which is that we don't know what happens between doctor visits. We don't know who is severely in need of care and who is not. So we see everyone else on a calendar basis. If we can take care of the people who are doing well without bringing them in, then we have the time to invest in the ones who are not. I think we're going to have a more honest, a more transparent, a more caring, a more timely doctor-patient relationship if we use this technology well.
Back in the 1970s, late 70s, mid to late 70s, I taught a course that I created back then called the Doctor-Patient Relationship Course at UCSD in the Department of Psychiatry. And no one ever heard of it. They thought I was crazy to even talk about this doctor-patient relationship. Let's go decades forward to today. What do you see in medical education that can be done to begin to inform young budding doctors about the value of AI?
We don't have to inform them. They know it. Every one of them uses generative AI. Every one of them has used ChatGPT or an equivalency. That's not the issue. The question is whether medical schools will evolve to be able to recognize how to provide superior care. The challenge that we have is that the curriculums or the curriculi of medical schools is based upon memory. That's an ancient skill. It would be as though we're trying to teach diagnosis without telling clinicians, medical students, and residents, well, there's CT and MRI and ultrasound. No, you want them to be able to use the tools that exist. A surgeon that I know well, she did a very complex neck surgery. It went beautifully. At the end of the case, the anesthesiologist says, I can't remove the tube. The vocal cords and the tube that you breathe, that you use for breathing while you're asleep, go between the cords. They are what's called adducted. They're stuck together. And if I take the tube out, the airway will be blocked. Do you want to take the patient to the ICU? Do you want to do a tracheostomy? She pulled out her phone. She went to ChatGPT. All of a sudden, she found 4 cases of exactly the same thing in the literature. She never could have found it, even if she left the OR to go to the library. And in each case, what happened was the local anesthetic that we inject in the neck, we actually don't use it for the anesthetic, we use it for the associated adrenaline to keep the blood vessels constricted, diffuses in a few patients into the larynx, into the vocal cords, paralyzing the muscles. And in each case, once it wears off, everything is great. She said, let's sit here for 30 minutes. 30 minutes later, the cords separate, tube comes out, patient goes home. That's the future. How do we teach that in medical school to think, don't go back to in your brain something you might have forgotten. Use the technology that's available. There's 400,000 people in the United States who die every year from misdiagnoses. How many of them would be saved if doctors were applying this tool? Another 400,000 have major disabilities. How many of those would have a more normal life if this kind of tool were being used consistently? I have to hope that there's going to be evolution in the medical schools. I think the likelihood is it will be slower than I as a patient would like.
Dr. Pearl, part of this is the psychology of the physician who's willing to accept the idea that the patient says, hey, I read this on ChatGPT, doctor. What do you think? And that white coat and the stethoscope doesn't infuse that doctor with an ego. I'm the doctor, not ChatGPT. I think when medical schools teach students the value of this, that may help that ego that gets in the way. What do you think?
Let me give you 2 points of reference, if I might. Number one, this technology is doubling in power every year, which means that 5 years from now, it's going to be 30 times more powerful. So whatever we have today is just the beginning. This is the dawn. As I said, it's only been 2 years. It probably took 6 or 7 years before we started to really understand how to use the iPhone. We're only 2 years into this. So that's one thing, is to realize how fast it's going. But I'm going to tell you about a study that was published from researchers at Stanford last month in a very prestigious publication called JAMA. They took 50 doctors and they gave them what's called vignettes. These are case stories, the history, the physical, the laboratory findings. And they asked them, 25 of them, to make a diagnosis using the traditional textbooks, journal articles. Another 25 of them used the same traditional material, plus they had access to ChatGPT. And a third group was only given to ChatGPT. 73% of the time, the doctor made the right diagnosis using traditional material. 77% of the time, they made the right diagnosis using traditional material plus ChatGPT. 83% of the time, ChatGPT got it right alone. So we can say what we want about this technology. The reality is that it is very capable and will become more so. And why that's so important is up to this moment in history, I can't think of a single technological advance designed for the patient. Every one of them, you needed a doctor to use, whether it was an MRI, a CT, an ultrasound, doesn't matter. We now have a tool that patients can use, and they will use it. And so what we need to do is to shift so that clinicians not only accept it, they respect it. You know, they're still thinking about the days of Google when someone would come with a 100-page printout. No, it's a very specific diagnosis that most likely is correct. And let's begin with that. Let's confirm it, but let's begin with it. Let's respect the expertise that the patient now has, not try to denigrate it.
That's the partnership.
Doc, both of you got to hold that thought. We got to take a station break. This is fascinating. And I'm getting educated, just like you all are as well. This is one of the top most 50 most influential individuals in the medical field in the world. And so just sit back and just take it all in, because he is educating us. And if you want to be part of the conversation, all that, go to the platform that you're watching us on, ask any questions that you might have, or pick up the phone and dial 1-888-344-1170. Again, that's 1-888-344-1170. It's your life, and we'll see you shortly after the break.
There's more stories of greatness to help you overcome adversity coming up on It's Your Life with James Cooley.
Craving a slice of Chicago right here in Temecula wine country? Then dive into legendary Chicago deep dish style pizza at Rosati's Pizza Pub. Piled high with gooey cheese, rich tomato sauce, and your favorite toppings, Rosati's delivers the taste of the Windy City right to your table or front door. Enjoy the cozy pub atmosphere and an impressive selection of Temecula wines. Come on down to Rosati's Pizza Pub for your slice of Chicago right here on Rancho California Road, or order online at myrosatis.com. Rosati's, where Chicago deep dish pizza meets Temecula charm.
Hello, I'm Dr. James J.C. Cooley from the United States of America, and I am here to just say, first of all, I'm so happy and honored to be on it, to be in the Coffee Book 2023, Unified Brain Z, and the other organizations. Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to be a part of this collection.
Noah Dingley here, producer of The James Cooley Show, It's Your Life. And the new audio version of James' book, Country Boy, City Boy, A Journey That Ain't Over Yet, is a must-have. James shares his true life story of struggle and success in America. It's both a cautionary tale and a roadmap to achieving the American dream. Get the new audio version of Country Boy, City Boy, A Journey That Ain't Over Yet by James Cooley on Amazon.com or wherever audiobooks are sold.
American Dream. This is a must listen for anyone who thinks they're stuck in life or needs to understand that their current situation is not their final destination. Country Boy, City Boy, A Journey That Ain't Over Yet is the unfiltered truth to provide hope for the future by challenging you to refuse to become a victim of life's circumstance and dare to become an overcomer, because a bigger, better, and more impactful life awaits you. Get the new audio version of his book, Country Boy, City Boy, A Journey That Ain't Over Yet, by Dr. James Cooley, on Amazon or wherever books are sold.
Listen up. It's Dr. J.C. Cooley.
Hello, welcome back to the James Cooley Show. It's your life. And just if you're just not tuning in, we are talking about, of course, it's 360 degree health. Dr. Michael Mantell, as always, here. And we got our absolutely fantastic guest, renowned Dr. Robert Pearl, who's here and talking about a whole lot of things, including his new book that's out, that appeared and still number one on the charts. And I tell you, and he's talking a little bit about it, but I wanted to dig deep into that. And I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Mike once I ask this question. But if you want to be part of the conversation, all you have to do is just pick up the phone, dial 1-888-344-1170. Again, that's 1-888-344-1170. Dr. Pearl, this amazing book that you just released, number one bestseller, number one on the list, and doing extremely well. And you know what gets me up to my wholeheartedly is you donating some of the charities to other foundations. That is so amazing. Not only are you educating the industry on the different technologies out there and the latest, but you also sharing your heart in many, many other ways. Can you tell our viewers and listeners a little bit more about that? First of all, the book, and why are you so passionate about it, and why you decide to donate most of the proceeds to certain organizations?
So this is the third book that I have written since I stepped down being the CEO in Kaiser Permanente. And all three books I've donated all of the profits to Doctors Without Borders. This is a wonderful organization providing relief across the globe, regardless of the country, the religion, the race. It doesn't matter. If there's a problem, they're going to be there. It's an organization that I work with quite a bit when we set relief missions to various countries. After the tsunami, as an example, in Sri Lanka, and after a variety of other earthquakes in places like Haiti. So it's an organization that I've supported for many years, and it's appropriate to take a book on the frailties and the problems of American healthcare and the opportunities to improve it. The first book that I wrote was called Mistreated. I think we're getting good healthcare, we're usually wrong. It began with the story of my dad who died from preventable medical error. And it talks about the system of medicine that's broken. You know, it's doctors are scattered across the community. They're not connected with each other. They're paid on a piecemeal basis. We call it fee for service. The more you do, the more you get paid. It doesn't matter if it does any good at all. You know, the technology that we use is left over from the last century, although really it's left over from the one before, because the most common way that doctors exchange vital information on patients is the fax machine. I teach the Stanford Graduate School of Business. When I tell my students that, they ask me, what's a fax machine? They've never seen one. And that's how supposedly the most technologically advanced profession is sending key information. And there's no one who could make the changes necessary to improve outcomes. And then I dived into a second problem, which is the culture of medicine. I wrote on caring. The culture of medicine kills doctors and patients because we don't talk about some of the things we don't like to talk about. And we don't necessarily treat all of our patients equally. And we don't like to talk about that. There's a whole series of cultural pieces that I believe need to be improved if we're going to make the advances that are going to be necessary to undo the stagnation that I mentioned earlier in America and improve the health outcomes for people. You know, our life expectancy in the US lags the other industrialized countries by 5 to 6 years. Not a small problem. But when I looked at both of these and I looked at the challenges that we faced, what I realized is we didn't have a tool that could actually accomplish the goals of, and I want to be very clear about this, lowering healthcare costs by raising quality. You know, we talk about ways we can cut back on costs and compromise quality, or we can cut back on quality and raise, change costs. But we don't ever talk about the fact that we can do both. And that's what got me excited 2 years ago. And that's when I decided to write this book. And I decided to make ChatGPT my co-author. I approach it the way I do a medical student or a resident, sending drafts back and forth. I started by having it read the 1.2 million words that I had written and published. So it knew my voice the same way, again, I would do with a medical student or a resident. And at the end, I fact-checked everything it did. It's a 30-page bibliography in ChatGPT MD. I found one major hallucination. It somehow invented an expedition to the North Pole that I can find no evidence ever happened. If any of the listeners and viewers can find it, please let me know so I can apologize to my co-author. But the consequence of that is I was able to complete the whole project in half a year. There's about 6 pages of the book that were written solely by ChatGPT, and I point that out in the book so readers can understand it. But for the most part, it was a collaborative effort, and I think that's what keeps driving me. I know we can solve this problem. I know we can make American medicine the best in the world, which is not today. I know it's not the fault of clinicians. They're working incredibly hard. They're just working with their hands tied behind their back and their legs tied together. We can free that up, and I believe the technology is a tool to accomplish that.
So what about the concerns that people raise, and you've raised this in the book, of technological bias, of patient privacy, the threat to job security in the healthcare field with the growing of AI? How do you think about that?
We have to look at the 2 different kinds of AI that are around today. The one that was introduced around the year 2000 changed the architecture of the information technology systems to more closely resemble biology. It has neural nets, it has deep learning, it interconnects various levels of understanding. And the way it works is you take, let's say, 10,000 mammograms, 5,000 of which show cancer, and 5,000 of which are normal or have benign disease. And the application finds 50, 60, 70 different slight variations between these 2 data sets. It assigns a probability factor to each. And then it's able to actually diagnose 10% better than humans, because we can't see everything it can see, and we can't think about everything that it can think about. As I said, 2 years ago, generative AI comes along. And I like GPT, or it should really be PTG, because that's what it does. P is for pre-training. It's been trained on the totality of information on the internet. It knows every book, and it knows every published journal article, and it never forgets. You know, I always say to doctors, I said, if you had a resident who knew everything in every medical textbook and every journal article, you would say this is the most amazing, smartest person we could ever possibly have. Let's hire him tomorrow. That is what the technology does. Then the T is transforming. It's transformed using about 2 billion parameters. Articles that are published more recently are seen as better than ones from the past. Ones that are peer-reviewed are better than ones that are not. Ones from academic centers are better than ones that are not. And all of this allows the G, it can generate an answer to any question that is asked. Now, why do I say all of this? Because the bias, and a great example came when Optum, a subpart of United Healthcare, wanted to identify 200 patients to whom they would give added resources because they were most likely to have a major medical crisis the next year. And the technology, of course, assumed that the more dollars that were spent on you, the sicker you were. And it identified 15% of the recipients being Black patients. Independent researchers came in, looked at the same data, and said it should have been 45%. The technology is biased.
Hey, Doc, hold that thought, because I don't want to lose that. We got to take a station break right now.
I'll come back.
I want to come back and please explain all that. Wow.
Yeah. What happened?
If you want,
who was biased and who was discriminating, and I'll tell you that after the break.
After the break. And so if you want to be part of the conversation, all you have to do is pick up the phone, dial 1-888-344-1170. Again, that's 1-888-344-1170. It's your life, and we'll see you shortly after the break.
There's more stories of greatness to help you overcome adversity coming up on It's Your Life with James Cooley.
A black man's point of view is the newest.
Cooley Show. It's your life. That's right.
Generation of leaders and heroes, get your copy of Country Boy, City Boy, A Journey That Ain't Over Yet by James J.C. Cooley, available on Amazon and everywhere books are sold.
Craving a slice of Chicago right here in Temecula wine country? Then dive into legendary Chicago deep dish style pizza at Rosati's Pizza Pub. Piled high with gooey cheese, rich tomato sauce, and your favorite toppings, Rosati's delivers the taste of the Windy City right to your table or front door. Enjoy the cozy pub atmosphere and an impressive selection of Temecula wines. Come on down to Rosati's Pizza Pub for your slice of Chicago right here on Rancho California Road, or order online at myrosatis.com. Rosati's, where Chicago deep dish pizza meets Temecula charm.
Cooley Show.
Hello. Welcome back to the James Cooley Show. It's your life. And wow, this is such an amazing discussion that we had with Dr. Robert Pearl and all the things that he is going on and talking about a lot of the things as relate to AI and how that helps the patient-doctor relationship, and also probably help us understand that sometimes if we understand ChatGPT, that we can look up certain things on and find out what might be some of the problems, but you still have to get in touch with the doctor. You still have to communicate with him. Yeah, so this is amazing so far. Dr. Pearl, before we even go any further, I would love to have you back on the show to talk a part two, if your schedule ever permit you to do that. So but this is amazing, and I know that our listeners and our viewers are getting a whole lot out of this. So that invitation goes out to you, Dr. Mike. We'll be getting in touch with you if you have time. But I want to go back to where you was explaining the different biases and discrimination of fault percentages, et cetera, that you was talking. Can you pick up on that one? First of all, can you go back a little bit so anybody just stepping in get an understanding of what we're talking about?
Yeah. So the Optum, the subdivision of United Healthcare, wants to find the people who are most sick, and it uses what I call a narrow AI tool. This is the older one, not the current one, not the OpenAI generative AI. And it identifies 15% of the patients being Black, and independent researchers say it should have been 45. What happened? Well, the technology assumed that if you spend more money on someone, they're sicker. But what was the reality? Black patients with the same degree of disease get $1,800 less medical care a year. Not because of technology, but because of human discrimination and bias. We know that during COVID, Black patients died twice as often, and yet when there was a shortage of testing kits, they got tested half as often. We know that patients following a procedure who are Black get 30% less pain medication because somehow their skin is supposed to be thicker and they don't feel pain. All of these misunderstandings are embedded in medicine. And so when you have a tool that takes two data sets and the data sets are biased, AI will give you a biased answer. It's why I'm excited about generative AI, because generative AI doesn't work that way. Like I said earlier, it doesn't take data sets. It's read everything. It's read all about bias and discrimination. If you say, I'd like to have you analyze this problem and give me an unbiased answer, one that is going to be the same for patients of all race or religion or whatever the problems may be, unless there's a medical reason to make some alteration in the issue, then it's more likely to do that for you. At least so far, generative AI is using a subscription model, not an advertising model. So I think it's less likely to violate your privacy the way a search engine does. I think security is an issue everywhere, but it's no worse or no greater in terms of a generative AI tool. When I look down all the pieces, we have to make sure we're in an era of bad people, ransomware, hackers, etc. But I think this technology is going to be better than anything we've ever had before. And as I said earlier, with a doubling in power every year, 30 times better in 5 years, 1,000 times better in 10 years, we are going to have a tool that can actually save tens of thousands of lives, lower the cost of care. This is really an opportunity for an empowered patient with generative AI working with a dedicated clinician to accomplish things that we never could imagine before. And again, I'll go back to the statistics. If we can better manage chronic disease, today we manage hypertension about 50 to 60% of the time. If we could manage it 90, or diabetes, we manage blood sugars only about 30% of the time. If we could manage that around 80 or 90% of the time, and we could avoid 30 to 50% of heart attacks, strokes, cancer, and kidney failure, what would life be like? What would society be like? What would the health be like? And I think the places that we're going to be able to use it actually the most are going to be in those communities that can't get access to the best medical care because there's a dearth of physicians and there's a challenge that they face socioeconomically, and they're working two jobs, so they can't see a clinician when the offices are open. And this is going to be the tool, I think, that will empower them if we can build it into community centers, into religious institutions. I think we have to understand and embrace this, not today to be able to provide medical care. It's not quite there, but it will be sometime in the next 3 to 5 years. So now is the time for us to figure it out.
Can you imagine if we talked about the doctor-patient relationship earlier? Doctors have stepped out of the exam room, and now we're working in telehealth. Most of my sessions are telehealth all around the country. The next step might be for each doctor to have her or his own ChatGPT aligned with that particular patient. So the doctor is communicating with the patient through AI, generative AI, specifically for that patient. The patient feels that there's the doctor is looking out. Hey, check this out, or that kind of thing. What do you think about that?
I think it's a possibility. I have a Fixing Healthcare podcast, and my last guest was Vinod Khosla, who's a major leader in technology world. And he talked about it being the intern, just like you're a clinician, or in your case with your PhD graduate students who are going to rotate with you, and you're going to have them do a lot of work. But what are you going to do at the end of the session that they ran? You're going to review it with them. You're going to use it as a teaching opportunity. The same thing would be the case. That was his view. That would be the equivalent of that. I think it'll be more than that. I think it'll be much more like an associate, that you're working with, that you can share cases with, that you get second opinions from, but one that you can really trust. If I told you that your car was going to go as fast as an airplane in 5 years and as fast as a rocket ship in 10 years, You would see the world very differently today. That's the equivalent of what's going to happen to the generative AI over the course of the next decade.
What do you suggest a patient say to a physician when the patient brings this to the physician and the physician is anxious or is insecure or feels like she is being put down and waves it off? What should the patient say to the doctor?
Well, the first thing I want to say, and I write in the book, ChatGPT MD, anything that slows down a doctor or compromises their income is not going to be embraced.
Right.
So we have to find ways to do that. I think what doctors are afraid of, it's less about, I think, their status. I think it's really the fact that they really would have patients come in with Google printouts, ideas that were totally off base. And if this technology is going to be doing that, and misinformation is an issue, it exists in society right now. But if that's going to be what happens, it would be very problematic. I think what they're going to find is it's actually quite good. I'd like to have the mother come into me with a cleft lip who understands the surgery, understands what's going to happen after surgery, how to care for the wound, how to take care of the child. I can make some slight adjustments, but I think to have an educated patient, and we haven't had that ability, so we've undervalued it. I think once clinicians understand what's possible, increasingly when I talk to doctors, they're all trying it. They're all using it. And to a person, they're amazed about how good it is. You know, I taught a class this summer for CEOs of large companies. And I talked about ChatGPT and what it can do. At the end of the time, one of the people in the audience came up to me and said, my daughter has a major problem. We saw like 6 different doctors over 18 months. While you were talking, I put all the information in ChatGPT. It gave me a 3 diagnosis differential. This was the top one that's there. Wow. If I had had this information, my doctors really would have appreciated it because they wouldn't have struggled so hard. I mean, that's what people have to understand. Why do people go into medicine? Because they want to help people. They want to make it better. Yes, sir.
We're out of time. This is so fantastic. Would love to have you back for part 2.
I would enjoy it. Tracy, I would enjoy being back with you and Michael and Dr. Michelle.
Thank you so much.
I want to thank you so much. Dr. Mike, thanks again for always bringing the absolute best.
My pleasure.
Michelle, thanks for putting together another absolutely fantastic show. Todd and my KCBQ studios, thank you. Viewers and listeners out there, always a pleasure having you. Always dream big, think big, and be big at everything you do. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. It's your life, and we'll see you then.
The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more